This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. You're listening to it. How you doing? I hope everybody out there is doing well. I hope you're having a great week. I hope you're accomplishing whatever your goals are for this week. I hope you're feeling good, taking care of yourself. I'm feeling great because I've got Empire of the Sun on the show this week. The legendary band straight out of Australia. So much of their music is tied up in kind of my nostalgic memories of my early 20s, running around Chicago as a young club kid. And as it happens, Empire of the Sun just finished up their tour for the 10th anniversary of their classic Walking on a Dream album. As part of that tour, they also released a limited edition vinyl of Walking on a Dream. So if you're a vinyl head, you definitely got to go grab that. It's a transparent blood orange vinyl. You know, everything that Empire of the Sun does is just visually stunning. The aesthetics are always on point. And if you grab the vinyl, you'll get a unique code to download the unreleased track called Chrysalis. I'll tell you more about that conversation in just a minute. But before I do, I gotta tell you, this week, Back to Back is brought to you by Serato. So for all of my DJs, all of my producers out there listening, this is for you. Serato just released the brand new software called Serato Studio. And if you've been looking for a way to spice up your workflow, to have some more fun, this is the software for you. It's beat-making software that helps simplify the path to music production. It's super fast, it's super creative, it's really fun. I've been using it for a while, and I would recommend it to everybody out there. If you're running into technical roadblocks, getting frustrated in your process, and just want to streamline things, go check it out. Serato Studio uses a DJ-friendly workflow. And if you're a Serato user, if you've ever even seen it before, and a lot of your favorite DJs are on Serato, it's going to seem really familiar to you right away. It's got a ton of awesome features. It's got great automation and plugin support. You can use it with your current DAW. You can just make a fun little project in Serato Studio and bring it into whatever DAW you're comfortable in. It's just great, man. I've been using it to just make fun little ideas and then bring them into Ableton. I've been having a blast, man. It's been really great. So go check them out. That's serato.com/studio. And if you go right now, there's a free 14-day trial. So you can just download it and be making music right away. That's serato.com/studio. And as long as you're clicking on links, you might as well go to the description of this episode. I put a link in there for the Back to Bangers Spotify playlist, which is a playlist that I make every single week. I keep it updated with music from myself, my guests, and just generally fun shit that I think you're going to like. Some songs you may not have heard, some old classics you might have forgotten about. You know, if you listen to this show, I hope you know by this point, my tastes are kind of all over the map. And if that appeals to you, if you have that kind of brain too, I think you're going to like this playlist. So go check that out. And whether you like it or you hate it, you can always let me know. backtobackpod@gmail.com is my email address, or you can hit me up at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. And if you're on social media all the time, if you have that kind of brain, I'm just going to chain all of these together. I want to see everybody out there who's listening, tuning in, enjoying the show. Make sure to tag me in your stories. Send me a tweet, send me a video, whatever you're feeling. I love meeting all of you guys out there listening. Anything you're posting up, I'm always going to be replying, reposting. And by doing that, you're really helping the show. That is one of the best ways to support us, to help us grow. It's dual action. You're helping to spread the word. You're doing a good thing. It doesn't cost you anything. And we get to connect. I get to meet you. All of that shit is so fun, man. That's the real meat and potatoes of why I like doing this show. So for this conversation with Empire of the Sun, man, I never really thought Empire of the Sun would be on this show. I love it when we can get bands, people with just slightly different perspectives from the people I usually talk to. You know, I've had Chromeo on the show, people like Keys and Crates, but this was one of the first times where I had a person on where his music was just so tied in to a lot of my early career memories when I was just starting off, really starting to play a lot of shows, make music on my own. Empire of the Sun, I mean, their music was in every club I was going to. Every single night you'd hear a new song, somebody's remix, and it was really the Walking on a Dream album that was just so iconic for that time period. You know, that album took them across the world. It won 8 ARIA Awards, including Album of the Year, Single of the Year, Best Group, 2 Brit nominations, sold over 2 million copies worldwide, and that's just the first album. They've gone on to release 2 more, Ice on the Dune and 2 Vines. That was back in 2016. And overall, as long as we're talking about numbers, I mean, they've sold a combined 3 million albums, over 650 million streams, 300 million YouTube views. They have a legendary live show that's taken them to the biggest festivals in the world. We talk about some of those performances. And so who you're going to hear me talking to is Luke Steele. He's the lead singer and one half of the group. He's the half that tours. We met up at a very, very nice hotel on the Lower East Side in New York City. I didn't know what to expect. And talking to him, I mean, it felt like talking to a rock star in the classic mold. One note for all of you listening is that, so like I said, we were in this really nice hotel. They reserved this whole upper floor for us, this beautiful space. We were looking out over Manhattan. And then about 2/3 of the way in the conversation, they started doing these crazy fire drill tests over the PA system. And it was so weird and disruptive. And they just kept doing it, and it kept getting weirder, and it just started getting really funny. Eventually, we were just dying laughing at the end. They started using strobe lights. I left a lot of it in just because it really added to the vibe, and Luke told me I had to leave some of it in. So you'll hear some of that. Don't freak out. Just enjoy it like we did. We covered so much ground. There's some incredible stories, both from the early days up until now. We talked about them working on the new album, which is being recorded as we speak, and so much more. I'm going to let you hear it right now, so check it out. This is me and Empire of the Sun, back to back. Let's go. How's New York treating you? When did you get in?
We got into New York yesterday from Boston, and it's good, you know, it's a great hotel. It's kind of, we're 5 shows down.
And it's a extensive tour, right? I mean, you got a bunch left.
Yeah, we kind of went into this tour. We've been recording the new record in Japan, and it's been taking a lot longer than all of Empire Records do.
Right.
So it's going to be 2 years, and it ends up being about 5.
Yeah.
So we had this. I had this great idea. Let's, do a tour called the Reimagine Tour. It's been 10 years. The first record was a real pivotal record in my life. It came out the week my daughter was born.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and sort of, it was strange. She was born, the record dropped, and then my whole life.
Well, right. I mean, having a daughter changes anyone's life anyway, but for you, then your life is morphing in 10 different directions.
Yeah, so it was, Sonny Tiger was born, and then this whole blessing came over my life obviously on that, and with the album coming out, and it just sort of naturally took off, which is great. As other musicians know, it's great when that just happens, because it's so hard. And it's the years before in the trenches.
Oh man, I mean, those kind of moments, they're the things you always think about, right? And dream and hope that one day happen, but they're not the kind of moments you can plan or plan for, right?
Yeah, that was so funny. So yeah, that was really unexpected. We literally just gave the record to the company and said, do what you want, and it launched.
Did you have any concept of at the time that maybe this could be something, maybe this could be a hit, maybe people?
We were really excited about. We were excited about the unlimiting factor of Empire. We'd been in guitar bands before, so this was really a project for us to, explore, different colors and make wild photo shoots and sort of kind of be naked a bit and sort of be bare. And
I mean, it seemed like from an outsider's perspective, because I have a ton of memories of my own life and my own career that are tied up in that time period, and that your record was a part of that. Like I was part of, the soundtrack of what was happening to me across the world. Like nostalgia and memory are an interesting thing to me, right?
It's so funny you said that. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, how they say, memory is the treasure of the mind. And when people come to the show and they say to me, your songs have a memory for me in my life, it means so much. And I think as you get older, you realize that, because every single person has their million worlds apart memory.
Right.
That is so distinct, and especially with music, because it sort of sings to the soul.
Absolutely. So I hadn't listened to the whole Walking on a Dream album, like front to back, in a while. And I did that when I knew I was coming to talk to you. And this is the funny thing with my memory, is that it didn't sound exactly like I thought it sounded, because I had listened to it in my memory so many times since I had actually listened to the actual record, right? Because for me, I was in Chicago. My DJ career was just starting to form. Mainly, I was, just a dumb kid running around with my dumb kid friends, throwing parties and DJing all over the city. And music like yours was being played, every single event. And so in my mind, that record, for me, is, this high energy, like girls screaming, something getting broken, like, because we were just sloppy and young, right? And then I listen to it now and I'm like, wait, that's still there, but there's so much more that I didn't get at that time, right? And then my memory has sort of morphed what the album was. I don't know. Like, I guess I'm curious for you, getting on stage and playing these songs now in the context of an anniversary. Do you perceive the music differently? Does it feel different to play, or does it transport you back to those times?
Yeah, it really does. And I think, I think that's what I was going to say before. It was a little bit of the tricky part, how we'd come up with this concept, and it was management. We booked the whole tour in, and then it was like, well, now I have to go and reimagine it, and that was, it was really funny, because it was, in a way you can't go out and just play your songs the same. You can, right. And Walking on a Dream, we still do pretty true to the song, but it takes me back to being in Shanghai, shooting the video 2 weeks before my daughter was born for Walking on a Dream, it being over 100 and not really knowing what was going to happen, but
I mean, it seemed like, again, from an outsider's perspective, that the band arrived, the project arrived fully formed. I think that's, at least for me, what was so striking, is that it was this clear concept right out of the gates. And that was just impressive to me, because, there were plenty of other, I think you got lumped in, sometimes unfairly, with a lot of other sort of dance-y bands that were around at the time. But to me, Empire was the one where I knew what that was. It was this crystal clear idea. And I guess I'm curious if, how much of that, how long did you spend conceptualizing it? Was that important to you to sort of have the aesthetic, just crystal clear out of the gates?
It was, but it was all born in Shanghai, funnily enough. It was...
how long were you there?
We were there for 10 days, and I knew we wanted something iconic, but it was basically came up with the makeup idea in the hotel, and then went to the Chinese fabric markets, and a guy made my jacket in 2 days. We picked some silk fabric, and I told him how I wanted it styled. He made that, and then found that first original crown in the antique markets.
Oh, wow.
But instinctively, both Nick and I being through art school, you know, he was on one side of the street in fine art college and I was on the other in graphic design school.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, he grew up on house music and dance music. I grew up in a blues club. So,
what do you mean in a blues club?
Yeah, my father's a musician.
Okay.
So, he runs the blues club in my hometown Perth. So I pretty much grew up not living in the actual club, but
right.
pretty much there. And then many times a week, a lot of the post-show parties would be at our house. So there'd be 20 or 30 blues musicians kind of, you know, training me and telling me.
That's so interesting.
How it goes down. So, yeah, I think by the time we got to Shanghai, it was, you know, we'd had our art sort of backgrounds and we knew it had to be iconic, you know, coming from guitar bands where you're just staring at your shoes, singing about depression.
Well, that's another part of it too, right? Is that you were talking about the colors you guys were thinking about in the music. And, you know, I think Empire of the Sun, anyone who has seen the show or listened to the music, you know, for me, it's bright colors, right? It's vibrant. It's sort of the opposite of what I would think depression looks like. You know, does that make sense? Yeah,
I think that's exactly where we wanted to go because you're still in your early 20s, you're still finding your way in the scene and you come through, you know, where I came through in Perth, it was quite a guitar, grungy, underground, indie kind of scene.
And
you have to maintain some kind of street cred, you know.
Right.
I think once I did that with my band Sleepy Jackson, and once we're fortunate enough with the first record of that, Lovers, to kind of be taken on. I got to sort of tour the world a bit. So by the time I got to Empire, I was confident.
Yeah, that's a very valuable little nugget there because there's that old saying, I've said this on the show before and I always mangle it, but it's something like it takes 10 years to make an overnight success.
Yeah.
And that's always funny. Like I love hearing those stories because here I am saying, oh, you guys came out fully formed. That's amazing. And, you know, of course, there's years and years of work that no one sees before that.
It is funny. It's funny with the 2019 generation of musicians and millennials. A funny story, we just got given some support acts to support us in London and Paris and, you know, upcoming bands. And so we said, oh, yeah, we'll give this band a go, you know. And then they came back and said, we'd love to do the support, we just need a little bit more money.
Yeah.
I think that's the epitome of music in 2019.
The generational shift.
How about playing for 10 years for nothing first? And come and ask for some more money.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, the amount of shows I played for, you know, you would lose money in the end, right?
Yeah, you'd
pay for parking or gas or...
And you talk about, those stories that people that go in and they do that, they work for nothing and they become irreplaceable.
That's the other part of it too,
you
right?
Know, they're smart and they have the integrity and the passion, but...
Yeah, and that's so valuable too. I get asked a lot sometimes by the listeners of this show, you know, if I want to get involved with the industry, you know, people with various disciplines, you know, how do I start? And that's the whole thing is you just show up and do it for free because you love doing it, right? And eventually, if you're passionate and you're good at what you do, you attract that energy, right?
It's funny. It's such a misconception because money has the same force as your passion, you know.
True.
So if you get them mixed up in the wrong order, it's a downward spiral.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's actually an interesting question for you. You know, so after the first record comes out and it explodes over a period of a couple years, right? And all of a sudden you're in a different tier or whatever you want to call it in the public eye. Did you feel any pressure after that, while you were on tour or even working on the next record, that either from, you know, the record company or even just internally, that now that money was involved, now that it's on this bigger stage, that something has to be changed or something has to be maintained? Was it harder to be creative in that space?
The second record was, there was extreme pressure from the record company. I think everyone didn't like that process.
I can imagine.
We wrote with a ton of different. We wrote ourselves in different studios around the world. We wrote in New York for 6 weeks. We went to London. We went to my place in New Zealand. Then we worked with, we went in with pop writers in the Hollywood Hills. Then we came to New York here, worked with Benny Blanco, went to Miami, worked with the Neptunes. We worked with.
Wow, that's all over the map.
We sort of went.
Were any of those, you just named a wide range of styles and attitudes. Did you connect strongly with any of those producers, or did you learn anything that was surprising to you in those experiences?
I think, Pharrell, I really connect with him. He just is such a incredible musician, and when he sits on the keyboard, he has a real finesse I don't think anyone really sees in any of the music he does or puts out or produces. He kind of has this laid-back Stevie Wonder kind of...
Interesting.
Kind of jazz knowledge of chords and progressions. And we were working in Miami, and he was in the house working on Despicable Me, and I'd come in, and in between doing that, he'd just write 3 songs and come out the back and go, "Hey guys, here's 3 songs I just wrote for you."
Oh man.
But he's got a really great spirit. His spirit is calm, and he's a hard worker. And
well, he seems, I've never met him, but he seems like a spiritual person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I always remember this quote Pharrell said. He said, you just have to focus on the vision, then every now and then just stop and take a look over your shoulder and see how far you've come.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Because this is something I talk about all the time. That's one of the hardest things to do, right? When you're on the ride, especially when things are going well and everything's moving at such a high pace, it's so hard to actually be in the moment and appreciate the crazy shit that's going on.
It's true, but, that's what I think. I respect an artist that work hard and they keep focus, Yeah. It was amazing. One time he was in LA, he said, "Come down to the studio." I went down to the studio in Burbank, and he had 4 studios, and each studio he had different artists in there. And he'd walk into one, there'd be some MCs and a bunch of guys rapping, and he would say, "Change this, change that, put this snare drum." Then he'd go to the next one.
Yeah.
Then he'd come into my one, and it was like a really creative director.
And that's a skill into itself, right? Totally separate from being a good musician. Were you ever intimidated or nervous to sort of show somebody your vision when you were working with, these really high-level people who had success in their own fields, their own rights? Like I read and had totally forgotten, you did something with Jay-Z even. And in those kind of collaborations, especially maybe outside of your wheelhouse, I'm curious what that experience was like for you too.
The Jay-Z experience was super fast. It was 48 hours.
Okay.
They literally called me and said, "I need you to get on a plane to New York now." And, being in the most isolated city of the world in Perth.
Yeah, that takes a while.
Yeah. It was like, it was going to take me 4 days to get there.
Right.
So they said, "We'll send you the files now, cut some vocals, send it back." So I just got right to it,
And did
actually
you ever...
went to a local studio, had it all running through the board through, U47s and all this expensive, rich analog gear. And it got to about 2 a.m. and it was just like, this is just not working for me. Take everything back to my house. Kind of hit a pocket there. I was doing like a lot of kind of halftime vocal recording and different just different kind of vocal sounds and things. Hit a groove, did it, sent it. Jay-Z called me about 5 a.m. Just said, "Genius, love it, dope."
Oh, that must have felt good.
And that was it. It was kind of quick.
Huh.
But I don't know, I have some strange connection with them because then I wrote a song for Beyonce on her number 4 record.
Oh, wow.
With Jeff Basker. And
when was that? Or when did you do that?
That was right before her number 4 record was finished because they needed one more song. And I just happened to be working with Jeff Basker. But
that's interesting.
You know, it was great because I wrote the lyrics like it was Beyonce talking to Jay-Z.
Oh, that's like, great.
You drive too fast, you smoke too much. But that don't mean a thing because I'm addicted to your love. I'd rather die young than live my life without you. So, yeah, I don't know.
Do you enjoy that?
I've been fortunate. So
absolutely.
With you know, and I have, I think, a certain favor, you know, in my life with that.
Well, sure. And I think there's a certain, it's interesting you say, you know, writing it from her perspective, because I think there's obviously a theatrical element to, you know, the Empire Project. But to me, that's almost a theatrical way of writing a song, right? Is you inhabit this character.
Yeah.
And I mean, certainly the Empire albums seem to have a narrative running through them a lot of the time as well, right? Like, I guess I'm curious in your songwriting, do you think that way, or am I kind of projecting onto you in terms of, you know, thinking about a narrative and a story?
You know, yeah, pretty much. Like the first record, we were 50% there, and then we're in Perth. I had this giant, me and my fiance at the time had this giant warehouse with, you know, the dream of in art school to have a big warehouse and you have a painting area.
Yeah, it's out of a movie.
And we would just wake up and smoke these giant Bob Marleys and then just paint and have movies projected. And
sounds amazing.
This and that. But yeah, that's where we wrote Walking on a Dream. And about that point, we're about 50% of the way through, and we went down the beach and decided, let's write some crazy story here that can, be the Empire.
Huh.
And that really shaped the vision of it.
Right.
We start out, we're standing on the shore, and then we end up with
I love
with
that it's tied to a physical place and a moment, too, you know?
Yeah, it was funny Walking a Dream because at the time Nick was dating this Asian girl, and she was actually in the Amazon on one of those expeditions, and she fell really sick. And she couldn't get in touch with anyone, basically. So he was buying all these different phone cards, and we couldn't reach her. So we decided to just hit the studio. So that song was almost kind of like a prayer, you know.
Wow. Yeah, it's so funny, those little moments where you can look back and say, you know, if it had happened a different way, if you had gotten a hold of it, you know, something like that. It's so funny to think how it could...
Right? Like Hot Tub Time Machine.
Exactly like Hot Tub Time Machine.
Yeah. Funny.
Well, and so, you know, Perth keeps coming up, and obviously... Were you born there?
I was born in New Zealand.
Okay.
And yeah, went over there really young.
It's an interesting place, Perth. I've only been there twice. Maybe even once.
It's all right. We don't need to talk about it.
Okay, fair enough.
No, it's a great town, and I think there's something strange about it having so much latency from the rest of the world.
Right. That's what I felt when I was there, is it just seemed so far away from everything. But then it's still a big city in and of itself, right? Yeah. So it's almost like it has its own weird reflected culture that's sort of a perception of the actual culture it's far away from.
Yeah, it's quite strange. It was.
What was it like growing up there?
Well, I think for me, that's why maybe because I became what I became, being quite, I don't know, constantly pushing for like elevation or progression, because if you didn't do that, you'd never get out.
Right. You had to be a dreamer, kind of.
Yeah, you'd have to really go for it to make it to the big smoke on the east coast, you know,
right.
Sydney and Melbourne. And then once you'd sort of made it across the great sandy desert to there,
right,
you could cross the ocean, the Pacific, you know, and make it to the great land of America.
When was the first time you did make it to America? Do you remember your first trip?
It was Sleepy Jackson. We We toured.
Do you know?
It was Coachella. It was like 2002, I think, around there. It was funny. We did Coachella, and then the record company said, if you do KCRW first thing in the morning, we'll put you up at a great hotel. And they put us up at the Huntley, which is right near where I live now. And funnily enough, I'd just gone in my room, then the whole hotel power just went down.
Oh, no. And that's your welcome to America moment.
Yeah, I was evacuated.
Oh, no.
Most of the night. But it's funny because that's where I live right now and like walk my dogs, so it's kind of...
Yeah, it's kind of full circle.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
It's strange.
Other than the power going out, did your experience in America sort of match your perception of it? Like, you know, if you're coming from Perth, I have to imagine there's a certain, you know... I feel like there's an outsized picture that's painted in America when you haven't actually been there, you know?
Yeah, it was amazing, you know, and America's, you know, I'd always notice at the Blues Club, you know, where I grew up, all the American acts would always be 10 times better.
Okay.
And they would always have a really high level of showmanship, entertainment. They knew what they were there for. It was just so obvious, you know.
Sure.
So getting to America, you know, it is the part in the movie where you have made it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and especially if you show up and play Coachella, I mean, that's starting off on the right foot.
I think I got lucky because the Sleepy Jackson record was going really well. And I've noticed now that when you're young, in your early 20s, you can be a little rough around the edges, but people love that. Excitement of the youth.
Sure. Somehow that energy translates.
And we toured America like twice around in a splitter van, and we did a lot of big shows.
Oh, so you got to see the countryside.
Yeah, we did a lot, and a lot of the guys in the band were reading the Motley Crue book at the time, so it was just complete debauchery. You know? It was
just reenacting scenes out of that.
Yeah, I think for us it was reliving that movie that we'd always seen where you...
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, you know. And when you're that young, you know, you can have, you know, 5 beers before you go on and 10 after, and you wake up and you just have a burger and you're fine.
Yeah, I miss those days, man.
I think the funniest story, we had a really bad manager who we used to call the Dragon.
Okay, great name.
Yeah, she stole so much money from me.
Oh, no.
Probably $300,000.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
When I fired her, there was, you know, over $100,000 of checks, because if you wait a year, you can ask the person to rewrite the check to a different name.
Oh,
there was
wow.
$100,000 of that. There was $50,000 on a credit card under my name.
Holy shit.
So it was so unmanaged. It was...
Right. That's extreme.
So when we played South by Southwest, the Dragon said to the band, because you're only playing at these places, you can only go to these places.
Okay.
Which seems,
sure.
It was like you only get a pass for these 3 pubs.
Right.
So after we played, the bass player and the guitarist decided to get really drunk and then go tripping and go to her hotel. We're staying at some crap hotel out of town.
Course.
She's staying at the Four Seasons. Decided to go to the Four Seasons and start ripping out all the flowers in the flower bed out the front of the Four Seasons. Start yelling out for the Dragon to come down.
Great plan. I love it already. I'm sure this was well received.
Yeah, but yeah, it didn't end well.
Man,
but yeah, it had everything. We had run-ins with the law, and
that's another thing out of a movie, right? The American cops.
The other best one was in Memphis. The bass player being so drunk he fell asleep in the lift, but half out of the lift in the hallway.
Oh,
so the lift just kept closing on his head.
This is incredible.
Until the security saw the lift was shutting, so they got the tour manager open the door, and they had this giant bag of weed on the table. And they basically pulled the tour manager out in the hallway. You know, 2 Southern black cops hold our tour manager up against the wall, feet off the ground. So
oh, man.
you get your boys out of town first thing in the morning, never come back.
God damn it, that's a great story. These are scenes out of a movie. That's incredible.
But yeah, that was Sleepy's in the 20s.
Yeah.
Coming to America story.
No, that's fantastic. And it's great that you can do all of that, have those experiences, and then when you get to the next project, the next step, you don't have to relive it, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, talking about the anniversary and looking back on it now, how have you changed your approach to touring in all of these years? Because that's another thing that, as we all get older, you have to change, because I was the same way. I was running around being reckless, getting drunk when I was in my 20s. And now, I mean, for me to tour, I still love doing it, but it's very different. It's more based around getting sleep, not drinking, or trying not to drink.
Exactly. Yeah. Completely the opposite. About 5 years ago, and every person's different, but I realized for me and my makeup, I can't drink at all on tour. Maybe every now and then I'll have a glass of wine with dinner, but I kind of have to treat it like I'm an athlete,
Right.
I have to kind of sleep, drink tea, eat well, hit the gym, and it's great. I just, I feel really a lot more honored, now that I have, these tours that I can go on, It's like a glorified holiday where you're the center of attention.
Right, yeah. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Is it interesting for you to kind of go back to, because I'm imagining this must be the first time in a while that you're playing venues of this size on this tour. It's a little more intimate.
It's strange, the first show was in the Metro Chicago, and the last time I did that 15 years ago was Sleepy Jackson supporting My Morning Jacket.
Amazing. I was actually, very random aside, yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine who used to be the booker over there for 10 years, and just a funny connection. I love the Metro.
Yeah, great place. It felt a lot bigger back then,
Right.
Yeah, it was kind of daunting going in first because, we've been lucky this last 10 years to play the biggest festivals in the world, the biggest venues.
Of course. And I'm sure the show was scaled up to match, right?
Yeah, but, I love the club shows. It takes me back, and it's kind of where I started. I feel really natural with people really close. And I think, again, growing up when I was 14, 15, in the blues club when my dad would yell out, "My son's out there, get up here." And you'd have 2 songs to just shred.
That's so cool.
So, it really took me back to that thing where kind of like Purple Rain, when he's in the little club.
Right.
It's alive and there's no room for, you can't mask anything, People right there and they see your pedals and everything. It's quite...
It's funny you saying that. You just gave me this realization. So I was born in Minneapolis, and First Avenue, which is where they shot Purple Rain, was sort of the club that I grew up going to.
Wow.
And I think it's sort of similar for me now that you make the connection for me. I think that was sort of my home and where I felt comfortable. And now I think about a place like the Metro or other, just other places like that. And there's this sort of instant connection.
Wow.
Like I just feel very comfortable. That's really interesting.
God, amazing, man.
When did you start playing music? If your dad was bringing you on stage at 14, 15, I have to imagine you must have started much earlier.
Like 12, 13. I was on a family vacation in New Zealand where all my dad's side lives, and it was New Year's Eve, and I was skating this half pipe in a place called Panui on the Coromandel, and I think I was trying to show off to some cute Maori girls, and I broke my arm.
Okay.
And it was about 6 at night. My dad had just, cracked his first tinny looking over the ocean. Idiot.
Yeah.
So then we were there for 6 weeks, and I think he felt, a lot of compassion while everyone else was like wakeboarding and water skiing to just start showing me some chords. And I hate wasting time.
Even at that age, you hated it?
Yeah. So I kind of, even through my cast, could sort of strum and get the fingering right of different chords. And after that 6-week vacation, I was quite heavily hooked.
That's cool. Are you that personality where, once you latch on to an activity or an interest, you just sort of go really deep, like immerse yourself in it?
Yeah, pretty much. I think over the years I've realized this is probably going to sound really vain, but I could probably do some things a lot better if I just worked out how to do it, and
Right. I know exactly what you mean.
I think going through art school and things like that, like now I do a lot of the graphics, a lot of the visuals myself and design all the wardrobe and different things, but years of paying people to basically replicate what you can do. And
right.
I think I got to that because you'd waste so much time, and no one's got that time to waste, really.
Sure. And that's a funny thing another misconception that I think people don't understand about, success and operating on a bigger level is, you think, oh, that's so great. You have this big team, everybody does the things for you. That must be great. But of course, what gets lost is that you have to manage all of those people and make sure that what they're doing, to me, it takes almost as much time, half the time, than if you just did it yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm not complaining or talking down. I mean, teams are necessary and vital for what we do. And, all the people I work with, I appreciate very much, as I'm sure you do. But it is just one of those funny things to me that, you bring someone on and then you realize, oh no, now I actually have to spend time sort of translating what's in my brain, which for me can be hard to do.
It's funny. It's still true with the biggest companies in the world, that the CEO is so valuable because it's their brain that's kind of driving the whole architecture of the whole thing.
That's so true. I mean, and we're in this age of almost celebrity CEOs.
Yeah.
Right? And, so for the better or for the worse, but it's a really interesting time because you look at, an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs or any of these names. And I mean, you say those names and it's a clear vision, right?
Yeah.
You sort of know what they stand for.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a CEO of your empire? I never really thought about that before.
Yeah, completely. I think the last 5 years we've just switched to a big management team called Activist in LA, which is amazing. But the years before that, we struggled having our management situated down in Australia. It was there's just something about the time frame which it never works.
Right. There's never a good time to talk.
And it was always a struggle for this last 5 years. It was, America's going to bed, Australia's waking up, or Australia's going to bed, America's waking up. And even with trying to connect with family, it never works. It's always out of sync. It's just different times of the world. So me and Snappy Dolphin, who's my wife, we became quite heavily involved in every single aspect of the show, from how much it costs from freight from LA to Medium in Colombia, to what does a set of lasers cost, or what's a guitar tech's wage on a 6-week tour, or, what's the rehearsals cost going to be compared to the revenue of the tour.
But that's great. I mean, that's really good to know for you as the head of the whole operation to know all of those details, right?
And it was really great coming in with this new team because, we all talk this same language. And it's funny that a lot of the biggest artists in the world, they're exactly the same. They tell me about Dwight Yoakam gets off stage and was like, so what was the merch count today? Or, how many people do we have? Why were the people missing in the front? But you get trained that over years of being in the trenches. And, a funny thing, they asked Joe Walsh from the Eagles, they said, what advice would you give your 20-year-old Joe Walsh? And he said, I wish someone told me that music was a business and not an art form. You just always learn the hard way because in your early years, you don't want to care about money. You just want to pick up girls, party, and play music. And
sure. And especially for you, who it's such an artistic, theatrical project in a way that a lot of bands aren't, right?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting idea, right? To sort of, you still have to pay just as much attention, even though you're also putting out more energy on the artistic side, right?
Even more. And the stories are just go on forever, you know, like after Bowie did the Diamond Dogs tour, you know, everyone that, you know, the roadies were getting their underpants, you know, washed and dry cleaned at the hotel, you know. Everyone's putting in the receipts for everything. And he was told at the end of that tour he was dead broke.
Man, that's got to be crushing
you
at
know,
that point.
It is after you put so much in and you...
Oh, my God. I mean, hearing that story about the dragon, that seems like a very similar moment.
Well, that's the thing. That's when I first got really taught. You know, I got taught by the best at 21.
Right.
And lost a lot of money. But yeah, that kind of set me on that path where you have to be really, really focus on that side.
Yeah, and it's sort of maybe a bummer to say, but that is how we learn, right? A lot of the time is you have to, either something bad has to happen or you have to make a mistake the first time around, and then you learn, oh, no, can't do it that way.
Yeah, that's right.
If we take it back to, you know, the early days again, how did you, I'm sure you've talked about this 18 million times, but briefly, how did you meet Nick, who would end up being, you know, your partner in the group?
So funny enough, my publisher, Simon Moore, he just called me one day and said, I think you should meet, you know, Nick from Panyao. And at the time, Panyao was doing this great, you know, they're still making great records, but he was right into MPC, glitch kind of cut up music, and it had a quite unique sound. So he said, you know, I've hooked you guys up to meet at the Darlow bar in Darlinghurst in Sydney. And we met up and, you know, had a few beers, hit it off, and the next day he said, come up to my property and let's get into it, start making some music. So I went up there the next day. I had this great Rickenbacker guitar I still have, and I remember just scratching the pickups and using coins and doing this kind of picking stuff. And then, you know, Nick's super fast in the studio with machines. It's like, I always have this dream of Nick, and he's in the middle of the room with big white hair, kind of like a wizard, and he has 4 different people in the corners who have some have guitars, other have machines, and he points like a lightning bolt to that person and they play, the sound comes on. But
I love that.
Yeah, he's incredible in the studio. He conducts the machines and commands them.
Right.
So, you know, the first session was like, who is this guy? You know, I'm just playing and scratching on my guitar and he's cutting it and putting it into the MPC and sampling it, and quite amazing the way, you know, he works like that.
Was it that kind of just instant connection?
Yeah.
That mutual thing?
And we're both quite strange, you know. We think similar, but we think in different ways, you know.
Sort of complementary weirdnesses?
Yeah. It's quite funny.
Huh.
And I think as the years have gone on, we've definitely grown apart.
Yeah. Yeah, we hate each other now.
No, I think we definitely know now in the studio. It's
the division of labor.
Yeah, and what each other does, and it's sort of like an unspoken thing. It's just, you might just say one thing like halftime vocal. It's like, yep. Yeah.
That's great.
Or, you know, throw a record on it.
Sure.
And it's so funny. It was like when we did a press tour for the last tour, we left, you know, I think it was K-Rock in separate SUVs. And I was talking to Lindsey Buckingham. You can pick that name up in a minute. But,
sure, yeah.
He said, you know, that's how it's got to be. You know, to keep the peace, you got to stay separated, keep your own space. You know?
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess that's another change, right, from the from 2008 until now is that since then you've gone out on the road, very heavily. You've played all these insane festivals, and Nick doesn't go out on the road, right?
Yeah.
And I have to imagine over time that would just sort of naturally change the relationship too.
Yeah, it does. It was really hard at the first initial thing when I spoke to him and said, I've been offered these really big shows, and it was a good year after the record had dropped, and he just kind of said, well, you just go to it,
Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, I was really surprised because I've grown up in a completely different culture where it's you make a record and then you hit the road.
Right.
And that took me a while to come to grips with. But then I think it became, well, I've got a child now. Everyone loves the music. I actually did this interview with a guy in Poland, and he said, so when does this become a real band?
Great question.
Yeah. And when he said that, it made me realize it's like, just get this thing on the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like when you were talking about that dream you had where, Nick is pointing to different people, and to me, that sounds like a stage show, right?
Yeah.
And I was about to say, oh yeah, you could incorporate that. I was like, oh, no, maybe not. But it's an interesting idea, man. I mean, even that you're having dreams about the person you're working with, to me, that says something about the relationship, right? Like,
we have a strong connection. I'm very the initial beginning of Empire, when it began, I've always felt that God's hand has been on it. It's had a lot of favor on this project. And, just this last couple of months, when we were trying to find a producer, I was just praying really hard, if you want me to end this band, I'll end it today. And I've never had the words, stop the project.
right.
He's had like tremendous favor on it, and it seems like in this age to keep it going until it's meant to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're talking earlier about recording the new album in Japan. I mean, it seems like the energy is still very much there. Just from people I know who have heard about the current tour you're on, I mean, I talked to a bunch of friends who are so excited. It seems like the energy is as strong as ever from where I'm sitting. Does it feel that way to you?
It's amazing. It's just the sessions in Japan, I think, like I'd never been before. And
it's incredible. I've been only once, but
it's just, I hear the stories about when after Bowie went to Japan, something happened to him. And I think that happened to me. And, the Japanese, the thing I've realized with the Japanese is their spirit is so calm, like a clear lake,
that's a great way to
under a salmon sky.
Yes.
And their spirit washes over you, and it kind of saturates you, like a cool mist. And it's strange. And then when you get back, you're like you step out of a dream. It's like, what happened? And I think for us, all the romance of the Japanese melodies and the food and that calming lake spirit sort of changed us. And we've just signed on with Jackknife Lee, who's I actually met 10 years ago. He was going to work on one of the Sleepy Jackson records, and it never happened, but we just did a few days in the studio with him, and it just sounds incredible. So we're back on again.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's great, man.
The band's back together.
And it makes me think, too, about the impact of physical location on a piece of music. Like, do you think where a song is recorded, like the setting, how much of that do you think it has an effect on the music, right? Because I think about, from your first album, then to the second album, you're, flying around, recording in all these different places. Now you're talking about you're in the one spot, a serene place. Do you think that has an effect on how you write and how the record ends up sounding?
I think so. I think it has a massive effect.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
It's just, it's just everything about where you are and the smells and the scents. And like in New Zealand, I go there every Christmas, and I just turn into this fisherman, you know, who's like lost in the forest, you know.
Right.
I just sort of end up wearing these strange Hawaiian shirts, and I just, you know, I'm out in the boat, and I just always write this really incredible kind of relaxed music, you know.
When you write a song, this is sort of a general question. I mean, do you know what it's for when you're writing it? Like, if you know, do you set out to say, okay, I'm going to write an Empire of the Sun record, or
not always? And that's what's so fascinating about music, because it's so alive, you know.
Yeah.
It lives in the spiritual realm. You know, you go into it's always the way you go in to write a ballad and you write a heavy metal song, or
right.
Or every time you go to write something heavy, you end up with a ballad.
That is so true. Anytime, I would take it even a step further. Anytime I sit down with a strong intention to write a very specific thing, it never ends up.
Yeah, it's so strange. And I think I've finally realized the level of respect and surrendering you have to it. Because I think through high school and stuff, I would just focus so hard on melody and how it should weave and duck and live in a certain architecture, and it can just stifle the way that the song goes.
Right.
So now I think after we've made some records, finally start to surrender to it.
Sure. And maybe just be more comfortable with not having an agenda or not necessarily knowing where it's going to end up.
Yeah. I've always said with music, you have to be the professional hippie.
What do you mean by that?
You have to be professional and focused, but you have to be like a hippie and just live in rubato time. You got to flow with the wind and go where it calls you.
Right. Not try as hard as you can, not to worry about a deadline or how long you have the studio.
Attention, please. Can I have your attention, please?
Okay.
We're conducting a test of the fire alarm system. Please disregard all activation, strobe light, and sound.
Strobe lights.
Strobe lights.
Oh, here we go.
You set this up, Willy?
And go.
You're going to have to leave this in, huh?
Oh, this definitely has to stay in. Are they doing it now?
Who knew that? Where are we? The Ludlow Hotel in the East Village had strobe lights. Is that in the restaurant, maybe?
Yeah, that's right.
Beautiful.
You could do a show right here.
Yeah. This room's just about big enough, right?
The only other sort of thing on my agenda, just because you sparked my thought process, is, you were talking about the spirituality of music. And earlier you were talking about, that you felt like God's hand was on the project. And it's interesting for me. I just love talking to people about the spiritual aspect of music and spirituality in general. And so full disclosure from my end, like I've never felt like a very spiritual person.
Yeah.
I was raised Jewish, but like I'm not religious particularly. But the closest for me that I've gotten to feeling spiritual or feeling God or whatever you want to call it is music. And to me, music, I mean, it is my religion. I would just say that straight up. And I think there's so many interesting connections between music and religion and spirituality. So from your end, I mean, it sounds like you are to some extent religious. I'm curious, where you approach it and how you see spirituality and music fitting together.
Kind of just like what we're talking about, really. It's you don't know where a song comes from, and it's strange sometimes when a melody just sort of jumps into your heart, and then you just sing it. You're like, wow,
right?
That was it definitely came from another.
All the best ideas, right?
Yeah, it's funny, but I think like as you get older, you start to get a lot more in touch to what's actually happening. And it's I think because you have the spirit or the flesh, and I think as you start
right, and we talked about the flesh earlier,
filtering out the debauchery of youth.
Right.
There's a band name for you.
That's
We're
perfect.
debauchery of youth.
Little drop D tuning.
Yeah. Then you tap into that, and you always, everyone is here, everyone on the planet is here to serve, As Dylan said, you got to serve somebody. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. And I guess for me now, it's like through music, it's, I want to serve all the good things, I want to write songs and melodies that transcend that fourth dimension in people. So when they hear the music, it kind of nourishes them.
Yeah.
And crosses that extra dimension,
Well, I mean, the stage show almost looks like a religious ceremony sometimes.
Yeah, well, so I think it's like we didn't get given these amazing eyes or ears or feeling of scent or touch to just not use them and have a few crappy park can lights, Like I want people to come in and it's all their senses are elevated and, it's a euphoric experience, but all those senses that they've been given is turned to the maximum.
What I always liked about your show is that it is sort of, it's extravagant and it's overwhelming, but there's a lot of it that's rooted in, oh, here we go. This is really what people love on a podcast. Okay, good. The live show to me, I liked that it was rooted in physical things. There's costumes and there's, these larger than life. You're physically bigger with these, elaborate headdresses. There's dancers, there's physical set pieces. And for me, I approach a lot of things with a DJ background, and the DJ thing was just, okay, who gets a bigger LED wall,
Yeah.
And it became all digital. And that I think can be very impressive in its own right. But after a while, at least for me, I wanted something rooted in the physical. And I think there's something powerful to that. And this may be a reach, but it almost ties back into the religious thing and the spiritual thing for me. Like it gives me that sense of, we're all here. This is a moment we're having together. Is that a crazy thing? Do you feel that? Does that make sense?
I feel that. And it's funny you said that because, I think this tour, there's this line that just keeps coming around my head. And it's as much as you may remember me, I want to remember you. It's just sort of become this thing that I want these shows to be, and for now on, every show I do become all-encompassing. We're not just there because you got a free ticket or you want to see the band. It's, in a way, you were called to go to the Empire show and experience the songs and experience this moment together out of all the other million things you could do in New York City on this night. But yeah, we kind of, I first designed the show as basically like a movie in real time. That's why there's voiceovers and things coming in. And, I think kind of like the definition of progression is that you're never going to be where your mind is. Your mind's always 2 years ahead. And it's like, so we're still chasing that. But, as it grows, it's going to get deeper and deeper. And
sure.
But I love those aspects like Bowie did, on the Glass Spider tour and stuff where it's, there's always different walls getting broken where, the girls dancing actually in the band, but then they're sleeping with the guitarist,
Right.
It's all kind of combined in this strange illusion. Yeah.
Yeah, and the band becomes sort of a family in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
And then there's different levels of it too, because now you've had fans who have been following you for so long that they're, I assume, part of a different kind of family, right? Like I'm sure you've had people say, I've been coming to these shows for 10 years, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Our fans call them Empyreans, and it's funny, just this last month, I looked up the definition of Empyrean, and it's amazing. it means the highest heavens, the upper regions.
Oh,
The
man.
azure, the wide blue yonder, the highest part of heaven.
Well, goddamn, that's pretty perfect for what we're talking about.
Yeah, so it was...
Come on, man. It didn't sound
Maybe we
good
can
enough.
smash it.
I know, right?
That'll make for a good part of the interview. What do you reckon? Smash it?
Bring it back to the old days.
Yeah. I used to have a really bad habit of smashing glasses on the floor back
really?
in the old days.
Yeah.
Stupid habit. But
Yeah.
the sound of, what's that Nick
Very
Lowe song? I love the
satisfying.
sound of broken glass. but
Right.
It would always make the whole room go,
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a very satisfying, especially if you're in like any kind of altered state. I think that's fun because that's just like a power thing, right? It's just
Yeah.
like I can change how this room feels in a second.
I remember doing it at a club in my hometown. Actually, I was dancing with a girl on the dance floor, and he came up and said, "Back off!" And I just got my glass and did that.
That's amazing.
It's a true story.
Did it work?
He backed up,
Yeah, there you go.
and then I ran for cover.
I mean, we were talking about, the family aspect and the fans who have been coming to see you for so long. Are you able to have these moments for yourself now when you're on stage in the thick of the show? It is a quasi-religious experience, like energy being transferred. Are you able to do what we were talking about earlier and kind of, have that moment where you stop and are in the present moment and able to sort of appreciate what's happening? Make
I have that
connection?
a lot more now because, I've been touring for so long, and I'm quite confident with what I'm doing. I think Empire's trained me as well to be a performer. We've done a lot of big festivals and a lot of big shows where it's just inevitable that you have to become more part of it. I definitely enjoy performing a lot more.
Yeah, you enjoy it more now?
Yeah, definitely.
Were you anxious about it at the start?
Yeah, and it's quite overwhelming, You'd have all
course.
these, 3 or 4 costume changes and headpieces and changing pedals, and it's all quite new.
Yeah.
But
Well, I guess I'm curious too how you see yourself, or even if you see yourself and Empire fitting into any specific scene at this point. Because to take it all the way back to what we started off talking about, if I think about, the first record, 2008, for me, at being a total outsider, there was this wave of dancey bands coming out of Australia, right? And all at the same time. And it was very easy as an outsider to think, okay, this is like one scene, one movement. And then I think after a while, Empire started getting lumped in with dance acts and even, DJs. Like Empire was getting, on the same stages and some of the same bills as sort of more pure electronic acts, right? Which is interesting because, I mean, hearing you talk, you're looking at it from a rock perspective, right? Like or even a blues perspective to take it all the way back. Did you like being part of those different scenes? Did you ever feel like you were part of those different scenes? And has that changed for you over time?
Slightly, and some were better than others, but it was, I thought we were really fortunate to just sort of be able to be welcomed into that sort of world because it got us, playing in some amazing places, We did big festivals in like Beijing and to a lot of the big American EDCs to ones in Europe. And
you guys never did the DJ set thing, right? Or am I wrong?
No, we've never done that. And I've always talked about it because, we turn away a lot of shows just because, it's hard to, to sort of scale it with everyone down a bit and still, we've always tried to keep the integrity of the show quite high. But yeah, that just keeps coming up and not yet.
Well, hey man, you got time.
I did a solo show down in the east coast of Mexico last year, which is really great. Just playing, Empire songs stripped down.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Is that something you think you might do more of somewhere down the line?
Yeah, it's really great. It's just a little 808 drum machine and sort of, SBD samplers and just acoustic and quiet.
So it's just you on stage?
Me and a couple of the guys in the band.
Okay.
Yeah, just hearing it, and that whole different aspect was pretty cool.
That must have been fun too, to just, for yourself to kind of just translate it into a new setting.
Yeah.
These songs that you've been playing for so long.
Translate it into the setting of my hotel room. I had my own pool
Oh man.
in front of my room on the beach.
That's like the best venue in the world.
Incredible. So beautiful down there.
Yeah, that's true. I just moved out to the East Coast from Southern California, and the best part, I was living in San Diego, and the best part was that Tijuana was 20 minutes away.
That's my big joke. It's like, Trump's going on about build the wall. Like, build the wall. It's like keep Americans out of Mexico.
Right, exactly. Oh, man.
I think he's got it all wrong.
That's so funny. No, Mexico, and especially, right past the border there, it's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I could spend so much time there.
Yeah. Mexico's been really close place to our heart. We shot We're the People just after my daughter was born.
Oh, wow.
And we have our biggest following in the world is in Mexico.
Is that right?
And we've played there so many times, from Monterrey down to Mexico City, Guadalajara. But yeah, I always see Mexico as a psychedelic Australia. I have this sort of heart connection.
There is something psychedelic about it. You're absolutely right. Oh, here we go.
Oh my God.
The strobe light.
Oh, there's the strobes. This is going to be the best interview yet.
No, this is my favorite. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, man. Do you find, talking about going different places in the world, do you ever think about, for your performance or even for how the songs will be perceived? Like, does anything get lost in translation, or do you see different cultures perceiving what you're doing in different ways?
Good question. Yeah, a little bit. It's hard to tell being on the stage in the moment. Like, it's funny. I come off sometimes and people go, they were going wild. And it was like, to me, it just felt like everyone was yawning.
Right.
It's always that strange live perspective, hey, where you come off and it's the best show in the world, and you talk to your mixer and he just doesn't even look at you,
Right.
He just walks out of the room.
Okay.
Something I said.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, like your perception of how a show goes versus the crowds versus maybe your management who watch the show. Everybody can have a different take of the same moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange, but it's funny on those small clubs because you notice the feeling of the room and the spirit of the room. Like the first night in Boston, it just felt like everything was a little bit confused, It's just, and then the second night, it just felt like a school graduation party. It was so high, the energy, and I just connected with all these people in the front row. They just had, not that the first night wasn't good because I had heaps of friends there and it was great, but it was,
right.
It's so different. It's amazing how different it can be. It's
even in the same room, right? 2 nights in a row, it can be totally different experiences.
It's just like I always wake up at like 2 a.m. and I have all these things I think about, like I'm going to say to the crowd, and before I fall back to sleep, I've like brought someone on stage, hugged them, did a photo, and we're best mates, and I know this guy up the back, and the singers and the lights going, and I'm the center of the moment, and then you get to the show and you go to talk and no one wants to hear you talk.
Right. Yeah. It's like, where'd my friends go?
Yeah. Or like meeting a girl, on a date. It's all a paradox.
Well, and it's interesting thinking about, getting like forming that connection with the crowd, the initial connection, because of course the first second you get on stage, you're feeling them out, they're feeling you out. A friend of mine said to me something I always think about, which is that in a smaller club setting, the energy kind of doesn't have anywhere to go. because, it's whatever, a low ceiling, it's a small room, and it all just sort of builds there. And that doesn't mean it's going to be great, but it's there. It's like a palpable thing. And then if you're doing, at least he said, then if I go and do a big outdoor festival for 20,000 people, then the energy can kind of just float away into the air, and you have to sort of change the way you're performing, or at least the way you're thinking about your performance in order to sort of harness that energy.
That's a good point. I agree
never
with that.
thought about that.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, do you change the show? Obviously you change, the production of it, the appearance of it, but, versus a large festival to a small club, do you change like your mental approach for what you want to happen?
Yeah, it's always different. Yeah, it always has to be a bit more broader brushstroke when it's a bigger crowd.
That's a good way to put it.
Where when it's smaller, it can be a lot more personable, and people can be close to you and see your reaction or your body language a lot more, and the intimacy is a lot more vibrant. That's
I mean, I have to imagine it must be refreshing to go back to the smaller rooms, the sweaty.
It really is. It really
rooms.
is. I believe that as well, because it's everyone's energy is so powerful. If it's like what comes out of your mouth, it changes the atmosphere. And if everyone's excited, it sort of creates like this beehive kind of buzz, and that's true. I like that.
Yeah. No, I've always held on to that one. That was Josh, formerly of Flosstradamus. If you know those guys.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know
cool.
if you ever ran into him, but yeah, good dude. Both of those guys are old Chicago friends of mine.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember doing some shows with them. I never met them, but
yeah, great guy. Oh, you know what? Did you guys? Did Empire do? What was that festival in Australia? Like recently, like a couple years ago.
Oh, FOMO?
Yeah, FOMO.
Oh, they on the FOMO?
They were on that.
Oh, that's right.
Because I think that's actually the last time I saw you play, because I was in Australia at the same time. I had just finished up a tour of my own, and then I saw that Floss was there, so I just extended my trip for a few days.
That was a wild energy, wasn't it?
Oh, man, yeah.
Like you get 20,000 18-year-olds, rip half their clothes off, fill them with drugs and alcohol, and run a festival. And
call it FOMO, which is one of the most brilliant names for a festival I've heard in a while.
There you go. There's your energy.
Absolutely. Do you have any memories from that tour? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that was only a 2-show tour.
Oh, well, yeah.
It was like short, snappy one, but yeah, I saw my friend who I hadn't seen in ages, and he was like tripping off his head, which is pretty funny.
Yeah. Back to old times.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the energy being that really young.
Yeah, I remember that too.
We're right on the verge here of, it's like the EDC of Australia,
Yeah, pretty much.
It was quite bare and wild. Girls Gone Wild vibes.
Was it similar for you playing EDC the first time? I'm trying to imagine you doing that show.
Yeah, EDC was... that's just in a whole nother...
EDC I love so much, but it is such a weird, alternate dimension event.
I think it's quite full on,
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it.
It should really be illegal for a married man to be going there. Yeah.
Enough said.
Just too much.
This has been really, really fun. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about? Anything we haven't mentioned that we should? Obviously, the tour is happening. The new record is being worked on.
I think we talked about some good stuff, and it's what...
Good, man. You feel good?
Yeah, I feel good, and I think we're about 80% through the next record. So hopefully, next year.
Fantastic.
Or the year after.
Right.
Or the
you
year
say
after
the
that.
one thing and you mean the other thing.
Yeah. I'll say, hopefully by 2025 the record will be out, and then will come out next year.
Yeah, then it's early.
Yeah, but we're just excited about that. It felt like the first 3 records were kind of like a pop trilogy. And we've always made such diverse music in the studio stuff the stuff on the cutting room floor is just, has, so many different palettes and textures to it,
Yeah.
We spend so much time, making sound collages and all kinds of weird kind of tunes. And the last 3 records have really been, pop trilogy kind of records. So
right.
I think this 4th record is going to see Empire.
Something new.
Yeah, quite. Sonically, it's like our dark side, our biggest exploration,
Fantastic.
So I'm really excited to see what the future holds, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear it, man. That sounds great.
It's going to be good.
Good, man. Well, I'll wrap this up by asking the same question I ask at the end of each one of these episodes. Just a simple question. You don't have to think about it very hard. Sort of just the first thing that pops into your head. Just looking for a time in your life, and this could be something from recent memory or it could be from when you were a kid, anytime, when in a moment, music really deeply affected you. And that's meant to be a really broad question that you can kind of interpret as you want. And your answer doesn't have to be significant. It's just sort of random access memory, the first thing you think of.
My first memory was when I was 14. I met this Norwegian girl who was over from Norway, and she had this long mermaid hair. And she'd come to Perth for 2 weeks. It's just my mother's friend. It was her daughter. And I just fell in love with this girl. It just became this summer romance. And then she was like, I'm going home to Norway. And when you're that young, it's like, it's so far away across the other side of the world. And it was, that moment, I really got into James Taylor.
Okay.
And those songs that I grew up with, through my parents and stuff, it just became this sort of like soundtrack to this lost summer love,
Right.
And I remember that being...
I mean, those are great moments, right? When suddenly you have a deeper connection with a song because of an experience you had in your life.
Yeah,
right?
It was funny. It was like something in the way she moves, or Fire and Rain, where it's like someone's there and then they're gone. And
right. And all of a sudden you can be like, oh, wait, he was talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. That's just the first thing.
No, I love that. That's a beautiful story, man.
Yeah.
And that connects back to everything we've been talking about. But yeah, this has been fantastic, man. Thanks so much for taking the time to do it.
Awesome, man. Good to meet you. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace out.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Luke. Much love to Empire of the Sun. I hope you guys enjoyed that too. Everybody out there listening, so much love for you too. Don't forget to keep up with Empire of the Sun. Go grab the vinyl, the re-release, the 10th anniversary of Walking on a Dream. What a classic album. And stay up with everything that Empire of the Sun is doing. You know they're working hard all the time to bring you guys some amazing projects. The link to keep up with them is in the description of this episode. And keep up with me too. backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address, or you can hit me up at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. That's it for this week. I'm recording a couple of these in a row right now, so I'm going to go sign off. I'm going to record myself talking some more, but you're not going to hear that for another 7 days. And until then, I hope you have a great one. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. And I will talk to you soon. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.